All right, welcome everybody to our show, Just Talk Live, Faith and Justice Talk Show. And Destiny, it's really good to see your face.
Likewise, Lee, I feel like with all the hustle and bustle, I don't get to talk to you as much anymore, but it's okay.
Wow. Usually we talk pretty much every day, used to be, and then we just
Yeah,
all of a sudden got busy. And yeah, I see you on Tuesday, so every Tuesday.
every Tuesday at 6 p.m. coming to you live.
every Tuesday. Yeah, and just reminding everybody that if you missed a show, you can go to the website justiceunbound.org/just talk live, and you'll catch all the episodes. Last week we had the co-moderators of the PCUSA on, and this week we have a special treat.
Yes,
I don't know if Destiny, you would like to introduce our guest.
sure, why not? We have the one and only Reverend Dr. Stated Clerk of the PCUSA, J. Herbert Nelson, coming to you live today. And we are so excited that he is able to join us and to talk about a little bit about his role, what he does for the PCUSA, a little bit more about him, and what he sees the future of the church to be. So, Lee, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, welcome, Jay Herbert. It's good to have you here.
Well, let me thank you, Lee, and also Destiny for having me as a part of this today.
Yeah, and so a lot of the times during our show, we like to, educate people a little bit. And many people may not know what the stated clerk is. And so I wonder if you can tell us what that means, what the stated clerk is.
The stated clerk of the Presbyterian Church is the lead ecclesial officer of the denomination. The person who represents the denomination, particularly across the globe and also in the United States, and speaks on behalf of the denomination, lifting up the policies that have been approved by the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church USA. And so for those who may or may not be Presbyterians, I would be a bishop if I were in the African Methodist Episcopal Zion denomination, or if I were in some other denominations, would carry some titles such as cardinal and that kind of badness. But at the end of the day, is where the real work stops that we have to get done. It's where the blame is, when things don't get done right, and when the church is not moving on a strong trajectory. And yet it is also the place that you get a lot of comments and positive comments, even for work that you're not doing. So it's a mixed bag of a lot of things, but at the end of the day, much of what happens in our denomination stops at the stated clerk's desk.
Thank you, Reverend Doctor, for enlightening us on the roles and responsibilities that you have for the PCUSA. But before we divulge you in conversations to go a little deeper about your tenure here and your, I guess, newly elected position of serving again as our stated clerk for the PCUSA, we want to know more about you, about the man, J. Herbert Nelson, Reverend Doctor. So can you just tell us a little bit about your background, where you come from, what led you, what was the journey that led you to stated clerk, and any information that you want to embark on right now?
Well, I am a third generation Presbyterian pastor. My grandfather, my father, three of his brothers, and now I've become the next generation to be a Presbyterian pastor. And it got so good to me, I actually married a Presbyterian pastor. So it works out real well in a lot of ways. My background, for the most part, is growing up in a place called Orangeburg, South Carolina. And Lee, I know you would appreciate that, being a fellow South Carolinian. And the other part of my life has been going to Johnson C. Smith University in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is a Presbyterian college and university there. And then leaving and going to seminary after that in Atlanta, Georgia, at what Johnson C. Smith Seminary at the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta, where I got a master's degree in theology there. My pastorates, for the most part, have been varied. I was a pastor of a traditional congregation. Well, let me go back. I started actually in a small congregation in Anderson, South Carolina. And during that period of time, those individuals nurtured and cared for me. They fed me well. It was a small church, and folks who had been without a pastor for a while after a split of a 40-member congregation. So I had 20, and the guy who left got the other 20. And I came in during that period and stayed there actually for 2 years, being somewhat of a student pastor, and they probably taught me more than I ever gave to them. But the care and the nurture of that congregation was significant and is still significant in my ministry, even here in Louisville. And I left there, and after graduating from Johnson C. Smith Seminary, and went to a place in Greensboro, North Carolina. And during that particular call, I had an opportunity to do a myriad of things and to live out my passion in that congregational context, which was, in fact, to engage powers and principalities in the Kmart worker struggle that we took on during that time. And that was a major piece of my life with justice work. My father having been in civil rights and my uncles as well. This was an opportunity now for me to step up and to see that role of ministry and a part of my ministry. And during Greensboro, we went through a 3-year fight to try and get workers a decent wage at a place called Kmart at the time. Ironically, I learned a lot about the denomination and its connections during that period, because it was a guy named Saplaska Jarman who actually came to us and said that he was working with responsibility through investment, and Bill gave us an opportunity to look at the number of counts that were against Kmart dealing with the issue of wage discrimination. And after 3 years, I was pretty ready to get back to my congregation and to do some work. It was a long struggle and a hard one, because we had to fight the city as well as individuals who did not understand the context of that work, and the Chamber of Commerce, who had invited individuals to come, Kmart to come there as guests, and a big GGO golf tournament. And here was 6 of us who started out really in the struggle and stayed pretty much the main characters of that work. And they taught me community-based work. I'd seen my dad do it in Orangeburg, South Carolina. I had seen others with him. But it was through that a guy named Nelson Johnson helped me to understand a lot about community-based work and how to do that, and also the issues of protesting and strategizing and the conversations that needed to be had. And that was really a significant part of my getting heavily engaged in justice work at that level of congregational context. And after I left there, it was that ministry and Nelson Johnson's starting of a church for poor people in Greensboro, North Carolina, that gave me a call in a place called Memphis, Tennessee, to serve a Presbyterian church there and to invite the poor to the Presbyterian Church USA. And of course, there were a lot of struggles in that one. The comments that Presbyterians are not poor people. Why would you start a church like that? And funding and a little bit of other things got real funny in terms of the continuation of that church. But thanks to a good wife who encouraged me, who stood with me through that process, and who ultimately believed herself that the process was worth doing. We stayed about 12 years there. We did do the work that needed to be done, and that church, Liberation Community Presbyterian Church, is still there. And I left there and came to a place called Washington, D.C., and began to work on the Hill for 6 years, advocating for justice issues. Jimmy Hawkins now is in that position. And now, after that, stated clerk, some individuals asked me about looking at that possibility, and I did. And so I became stated clerk of Presbyterian Church USA. And it's been a tremendous journey. and one that, quite frankly, has in so many ways allowed me to really be able to see the full scope of the church and to appreciate this denomination for what it is.
Yeah, and I know I remember the first time hearing you speak. It was a middle school conference. Now, you may not remember this, at Camp PD in Bennettsville, South Carolina. And I was on the Youth Connection there. And I remember you being one of the first ministers that I heard really talk about, justice and as our calling as Christians to really be to be on the side of the poor and to be on and to really fight for justice in our world. And I remember that when I was in middle school, really hearing that and taking that in, and then seeing your journey in ministry and how you have also kind of reoriented this denomination in many ways. And I know, and you've said it a few times that the church is a movement, and I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit, because I saw that in you from a very young age myself, and as Jay Herbert was saying, I'm also from South Carolina, but I wonder if you could speak to what you mean by it's a movement.
Well, I'm convinced that one of the challenges we have to deal with in this period is moving from an institution to a movement. We have institutionalized faith in such a way that, quite frankly, we move very slow to the place of the greatest resistance to the gospel. We take too many meetings to try to figure out whether or not we're going to be engaged in things that, quite frankly, are very clear that somebody has to get engaged, and it is a role for us. And we do a lot of planning. And that's always been a part of what I've known in the Presbyterian Church all of my life. But I came out of a context, as I shared earlier, with my father, who, in another kind of understanding of faith, is that you move quickly to the place of the greatest resistance to the gospel. And so during the civil rights movement, and what was modeled for me as a child, really not really even realizing I was taking these things in, was that we don't have time to wait. We have only this particular moment. And I learned from my time in grade school, a poem that stayed with me. Have only just a minute with 60 seconds in it. Forced upon me, didn't choose it. I must suffer if I lose it, give account if I abuse it. Only just a minute, but eternity is in it. And this really is how justice works. I mean, we can sit back and try and work out things that people have been trying to work out for the last 40 years and nothing changes. Or we can come straight in the middle of this and raise some significant questions and formulate some kind of action to have individuals to respond, because they too are finding themselves on a hot seat. And this is what I think oftentimes we have a tendency in the church. And I love this denomination. I don't intend to go to any other denomination. I've been here all of my life, and the Presbyterian Church has been good to me. And I love our theology and all of the other things about it. But I think the challenge for us is that we are always seemingly at times worried about what we will lose. And I think that's the wrong way to go into any struggle. We have to think about what it is that we are going to gain, because we have the greatest power that anyone knows, and that is the power of the good Lord behind us. And I wonder sometimes if we really have that understanding and assurance when we have to deal with some difficult places in the life of our work and ministry. And so risk-taking is a part of what we are called to do. Jesus was not standing on the sideline biting his fingers. The Bible reminds us always he was in the game. He was pushing the edges. He was dealing with people in power. He was questioning them. And he was defying the rules that they had put in place to keep him away from poor people. And so when we talk about the modeling of Jesus, in a sense, it means we have to live dangerously. Our lives become a little less important. And the people we are called to help and to really walk with, they actually are the ones that take on the paramount needs of our time. And having grown up with that in my house, the house, not my house, but my parents' house in which I grew up in, Thanksgiving, for example, I mean, I should say Christmas, I didn't get to ride and open my toys and ride my bicycle, that Western Flyer bicycle. I peeped into the living room and I saw the bicycle while we were getting ready to get in the car to go to the jail. And then we took all of these baskets around. And when we got back home, it was nighttime. And that Western Flyer bicycle was sitting there, and there was a tree. We had not opened the thing. And I will never forget just breaking down and crying as a little boy, because I knew that bicycle was there and it was dark and I could not ride my bicycle. And so my dad my mother got behind the wheel of the car, and my dad, the training wheels were on, and my dad took me for a ride while he was holding, I should say. I was riding the bicycle and pedaling with it, and while he was pushing me and holding, make sure I didn't fall. But that that I was taught that, you know, you in a sense don't put yourself last, but you do have to think about those who are struggling, who are less fortunate, and the systems that put them in that place. And I think that's the kind of risk taking that this denomination has historically done, and that we are trying to actually regain in this period. And it's not safe. It's not always going to be easy. And these are long stretches of time that we have to put into justice work. And I think that's why it's so difficult getting people to really engage, because we know that the tables are not going to be overturned in one day. And so that's kind of been my understanding of work, that Jesus was about justice. And you can read it through and through. You can read the Old Testament and the cries of the prophets who were about justice, do the people right. All of these are parts of our faith. And I believe when you're not doing justice, you're not being faithful.
Yeah. Thank you for those remarks, and also finding a way for us to learn more about you and your early childhood by weaving in those stories that you were taught to do justice work at an early age. And I guess for me, as like the aha moment of some of the initiatives of your hands and feet, I guess, work that you have done as a state clerk, not only to have General Assembly and a bunch of Presbyterians come for a week or two in one area, but to really engage and get to learn the community and walk alongside the community, was your Hands and Feet initiative in doing work with jails at an early age and ending cash bail. For those Presbyterians or viewers who are not familiar with your Hands and Feet initiative, what is Hands and Feet, and what is some of the work and stories and initiatives that have come out of this movement?
When I had my first General Assembly, which was actually in St. Louis, we were dealing with still the remnant of Michael Brown's shooting, and the areas of despair in St. Louis that police were preying on, and that's P-R-E-Y, I-N-G. And the question that we had to raise going in was, what was it? When we go to a big box General Assembly, which we were doing at that time, and we find ourselves staying for 8 days, spending money, eating in restaurants, having a good time, making decisions about our denomination and also our approach to the world. But what is it that we leave behind after we leave that General Assembly? What have we taught our own people about the context in which we are now having the assembly? And when we looked at the assemblies that we were going to have in succession, it was going to be St. Louis, and then we were going to have Baltimore, and then we were going to end up in right down the road here. Oh my God, our next General Assembly. We found out that all of these places have had gun violence, murders and killing. And somehow or another, what does that mean in the context of our General Assembly? When we come into a city, we spend a bunch of money, we leave, and we leave the city no better than it was when we came. So Hands and Feet is a General Assembly initiative. It is not to be confused with the mission work of the denomination. And we've had to continually explain that. This is about an event and how we deal with that event in relationship to the community and the context of a community that we're in. And the other part of it, I think that is important for a person to understand, is that this is a part of being a citizen, in a sense, with the people who are suffering in the midst of their struggles. And so in every one of the cities we've gone to, with hands and feet, we raised $48,000 for cash bail. And we've learned a lot, I think, as a church, because the question was, how do we handle the money? How do we do these things? And in reality, if you're going to be a partner, and you're going to come and utilize the city where people live as a platform and ask them to be a part of what you are doing for their city, it is only the next step and measure to invite them into the process, not as people who hang around you, but as people who will lead you. And again, it's the teaching of our own denomination how we do this. We can't walk in and boss talk folk because we're the Presbyterian Church USA and we're going to give you some money. We are coming in and we are offering ourselves to this work. And in a sense, we're in a relationship with you in this. And we were initially going to deal with this issue around the shootings that had taken place. And there were people who were sitting in that circle with us who said, no, we don't want that. What we want to deal with is cash bail and the ending of the cash bail system. And to be very honest with you, all of us sitting around the table had no idea what they were talking about. We were still looking at Andy Griffin, and my man that came in and took the keys off, and then when he needed to go to sleep, and then when he wake up, he let himself back out of jail. Otis was his name, and thinking that was the cash bail system in the United States. No, this is a system that started out as a place for people on misdemeanor crimes. Now this thing is taking people on misdemeanor crimes, and people are serving sentences in jail because the longer they stay in jail, the more money the city gets from the state. And this has now become a money mill for government. And we are saying people should never be used like that, particularly on the issues of misdemeanor crimes. I mean, crimes where you've been in and out, you see a judge, you even go back to work the next day. We're now seeing people staying in there for years. And if you begin to go to places like Chicago and the Cook County Jail, I mean, all of that is on record as a place of what's happening with some of these places across the country. And it was noble that they educated us and gave us a chance to be educated and to celebrate with the community there that we were hosting our General Assembly. And at the same time, we were doing something that would make the community a little bit better. And I think that came through trust because we gave them the money. And they had a vetting agent who handles this kind of thing. And we said, here it is. But that was the trust that was built with the community. So rather than flash in the pan, come in, have a meeting and leave, and the place is no better than it was when we left. That was when we got there, that's what Hands and Feet Initiative was all about. Changing the perception of who we are as people that just dip in, make money, have a good time, have a big meeting, and then walk out of town, and the city is no better than it was when we came. We're the church, and so we have a responsibility to do something.
Yeah, and I also think that also connects to and Desi and we were a part of the Peace USA Week of Action, and really being a part of that kind of statement that says that we are the Presbyterian Church and we do stand for justice, but on the other side of that, we've seen a lot of people be very uncomfortable. We've seen people say that the church is being too political, or the church shouldn't, put their nose in certain issues because that is, for them, that is not what the church is. It is. And I wonder what you would say about that, because, I mean, we had a lot of people who hopped on board and were very proud of this church, but we also had some people asking those questions about what it means to be engaged. Is the church called to be, quote, political? So I wonder, as you're talking about ending cash bail and things like that, what are your thoughts on people saying that kind of stuff?
Well, I think one, they're not political. there are people's lives. We have children right now in a pandemic going to school, have no business in school. And I'm saying that just straightforward. That's not General Assembly policy. That's just an opinion. And they have no business doing it because we have a virus that is killing people each and every day. We have events that are going on, and we're forcing these children back to school. We're forcing their parents, who in some instances don't have an opportunity to exercise any other option. Is that political? No, that's saving children's lives. When a person's loved one is locked up in a jail cell because they had too much to drink, and they got stopped by the police walking on the sidewalk, staggering, and then they end up in a drunk tank. And then from the drunk tank, 3 months later, they still haven't seen a court case, a case come before the court that defends them. Is that political, or is that trying to help someone who is can't get out and may not have the wherewithal? I think example is I was at a church, and I will not name it, but I was at a church preaching, and I actually, a Presbyterian church, ended up using the cash bail piece as a reason, or at least sharing with individuals what happened in St. Louis and why it is important that we get engaged in justice issues. Right after that worship service was over, the person who played the organ, and I mean high church organ, I'm not talking about bang, bang, bang on the piano, I'm talking about high church organ. He played that, and he walked up to me in the fellowship hall, and we were standing by what was a stage in the fellowship hall, and he took his leg and he threw it up on the stage, and he said, "I guess you know what this is." And I knew exactly what it was. It was an ankle bracelet, and he was being monitored. And I said that. He said, "I have a PhD in organ, and after I got my PhD, some of my friends came here, and I basically went out and we had some drinks together, and probably celebrating. I had too many, and they asked whether they could take me home. I said, no, I don't live that far from here, and I started walking. And the next morning when I woke up, I was in jail. He said, I'm now have an ankle bracelet. I'm spending money that I don't have. Thank God for this church giving me an opportunity. And it was a Presbyterian church. And thank God that they have wrapped their arms around me to take care of me through this period, even in court cases and working through it. And here's a man who ties one on one night, celebrating his graduation ceremony and his new accomplishment with his friends. And here he is now 6 months later with an ankle bracelet on. That keeps him from work if he did not have that community to help him. It keeps him from being able to engage a broader community. If you think about how people live, if he did not have that community with him, he would not have a place to stay. I mean, all of this now spirals people's lives into something that is desperate. And here's a guy with a PhD in organ, and he's in that cycle, but he was blessed to have some people to help him out. Most people don't. And so this is what we are seeing. And I don't think that's a political issue. I think that's the same kind of issue that Jesus talks about. Release people from prisons, feed the hungry, clothe the naked. That's a part of Jesus's mandate. And that's what we're doing when we begin to look at these mandates that free people from the bondage that they're in. And I raised the children in the beginning because they're the ones oftentimes that find themselves without parents at home. They find themselves without any ability to even have ability to shape a reason or a way of reasoning of what police do. They lock people up. I mean, they don't learn, as I learned growing up, even in a segregated society, the police it was officer friendly. It was friendly to kids. Now today, they're shooting children. There is something inherently wrong with where we are going in this period. And I am convinced that the church cannot sit idly by and expect it to stop, and or to expect that one day to not expect that one day we might be the very victims of it. And we've seen that in killings and shootings in churches. That people have walked in on Sunday morning and just shot up the place and killed people. I think this is something that we can't politicize. We're talking about life and death. And I think we've got to get out of this thing in the church of looking at atrocities as something that you have to wait for permission to engage. We are called to be more than conquerors.
Thank you for those comments. And as you may know, Just Talk Live is a faith and justice talk show, but it is geared to young adults. And right now, young adults are questioning, where is the church? Like you were saying, we can't wait to engage. We need to step up. We need to be those hands and feet that you have called us to be during General Assembly, but also be part of those tough conversations. So knowing that this talk show is geared to youth and young adults, what would you say to young adults who want to engage more in the social justice work of the church, but might not know what avenues to go into, or might not feel as if the church is somewhere where they can do social justice work?
I think you shop until you find a church that can embrace what you're asking for. I don't think you leave church because there are plenty of churches out here that are doing the work. And in the Presbyterian Church USA, we have a whole lot of churches on the same block. We have a lot of congregations. And there may not be that congregation that you walk into on that first Sunday, and that's the congregation that you see yourself actually connecting with. But don't give up on church because that one church is not indicative of what all churches are doing or not doing. And I think the second piece that I would lift up in this is that, we have to look at ourselves as, again, words I used earlier from scripture. We have to deal with being more than conquerors. Sometimes it is our ability to change the church by what we bring to it. I remember a young lady coming back a few years ago when I was in the DC office, and she came back from Honduras, and she went to a church during the course of the week, and she asked the church that they have a relationship with the persons who were from Honduras down the street. And the folks in the church said, well, I have everybody from Honduras here. I said, yes, you do. And she was given a note when she was in Honduras to actually give to a family that was in the same community near where she grew up. And so she took it there and then went and asked that church. And they did not even know that the church, that those people were there. And here we are sending a missionary at that time to Honduras. And at the same time, we are not seeing people right down the street from us who are from the same area, who have a different context here in the United States and who have a different experience. And I'm convinced that we have to be willing in this day and age. I call it church hopping. But the reality is it's not so much church hopping as much as it is finding a place that is the right fit. Don't give up on the Lord. Don't give up on church, even as an institution. But be recognized that all churches are not the same. And all Presbyterian churches are not the same. There are some churches that are doing some significant work in communities that bear the name Presbyterian. But take some time and do an assessment as you would with any other thing with regards to what church actually fits what you bring to the table as a contextual need in the life of your own spirituality. And so I think that's the information that I would give. I'm like my mother in a lot of ways. You can't live without the church. You got to have church. You have to have some spiritual grounding. And you have to have some people who, when there's nothing left, you can turn to. And those individuals can give you not just guidance on what you ought not to do, but they can give you some guidance on what you need to do, because some of them, even in these churches that are very, very old in terms of chronological age, the wisdom that comes out of that is just something that we can't do without. Old folks know the journey, and they've been on it, and they, in their own time and consciousness, are willing and desire to share it if we're willing to ask for it, and if we're willing to be in the midst of them long enough to hear it. So we all need that. And even as a grown man, I find myself going, back to some wells of faith back in South Carolina, and talking to some of those folk I used to pastor. Some are real old now, but there's no such thing as Red Fox would say. There's no such thing as an old fool, because you don't get old being a fool. And so these are people who can nurture you too. It's not just about justice, but who can care for you, who can nurture you, and who can teach you a way because they're living it and they're modeling it every day.
Yeah, and we've really, I know Destiny and I have really talked a lot about intergenerational dialogue and the need for that more, and I hope we can cultivate that more and more, as we're trying to figure out what the church looks like now. Because right now we do this, and you can go to 5 different churches right now on any given Sunday, just in one screen on your computer. But I'm also going to go back to a part of your story when you talked about working for the Office of Public Witness in DC, and we are up on an election right now. Actually, people are voting right now. And there is a lot of energy in the church right now in the denomination about voting, and we've gotten some pushback about that because, again, that's too political. But I wonder if you can speak to that a little bit, because we're big advocates of voting on this show. I think we might say it every time we end for people to go vote, but it is a part of our faith, and I wonder if you can speak a little bit to that.
Snow, sleet, or rain, vote or don't complain. I believe everybody needs to vote, and if you don't vote, you have nothing to say when it's over. We are in a time right now in the life of this country where I think, are at a pivotal moment of developing some levels of greatness or going solidly in a direction that is a miscue. And that we will be paying for generations and generations to come. We cannot sit on the sidelines idly by in this election process. I'm not telling people who to vote for, but I'm very clear that if one does not vote in this particular election, there is something inherently wrong with how they understand the world in which we live and how it operates and what our role is in it. I was taught as a little boy to vote. I was taken to the polls by my father and mother as they took turns voting. I was watching. And one of the realities of that was it taught me something about being a part of legitimate opportunities for change. And this is one. We may not ever be the president of the United States or a senator or any candidate for any office, but in being able to vote, we are electing those people who will. And I think that's the challenge now, is to understand the power of the vote in the United States of America and the freedom that we have to do it when we know that there are other countries, quite frankly, where people cannot vote at all and the laws restrict them from voting, and dictatorships that we've seen. I would ask people not to waste their time. This election, I am convinced, however, is a game changer. And how we come out at the end of this lecture, this particular election, will in fact determine either the prosperity or the folding of this institution in ways that we never dreamed possible. This is an election that I think every human being, and I'm not telling you how to vote, but you need to be in the game. And that piece of it, I think, is a challenge to all of us, because there's no excuse. And especially with voting laws in this particular days that are being overturned to keep us from voting, to me, that says something about how important voting is.
Yeah, as Reverend Doctor said, this is an important election year. And we at the Presbyterian Church USA and Just Talk Live do not tell you who to vote for, but we recommend that you get out the vote. There's multiple ways to vote, especially with the season of COVID-19 going on. We ask that you educate yourself on how to do that. If you feel fierce and brave to go do it in person or by absentee ballot or by mail-in ballot, but just make sure you follow the directions and you find the best proper way to vote in your municipality. I want to ask a question regarding back to the Office of General Assembly. I know there's a lot of resources, a lot of things, initiatives that go on inside of the structure that's underneath you, but what are some resources that the Office of General Assembly is offering right now that I know there's plenty, but if you could just name one resource that you want to talk about right now that the Office of General Assembly is offering, and or one publication that people can turn to during this times to help ease whatever they might be going through.
I think we have some technical difficulties, Jay Herbert. I think I'm not sure.
Well, I think one of the things that
there we go.
we are doing, and we're continuing to. Our office is pretty much the governance office of the denomination, and so a lot of what we are doing right now is the types of interpretations that we have to give with regards to the ongoing struggles that we're facing in the streets. That's not necessarily in a publication, but I would invite people to. Oh.
Yeah, I think we're just a little lagging. Yeah, I think the audio is a little off, but I think if there are any resources that we come up with, we can always put those in the where the video is, and yeah, we can make that work. And if Jay Herbert happens to come back, we were going to close with Jay Herbert anyway, and so I guess the internet didn't want to wait for that. But yeah, sometimes it just happens in these days. But yeah, if Jay Herbert comes back, we'll bid him adieu and say thank you. But if he doesn't, thank you, Jay Herbert, for this conversation. And again, I think it's very important for us to be very engaged in what's happening right now. We have to vote. Destiny knows all about the voting. Destiny is an elected official. Was elected official, right? But yeah, go vote. If you're not registered, I think this week in some states it might be the last days to do so. So do that. But before we do close, we do have some little announcements that are going to be happening on the show in the next couple of weeks. One of the more exciting things, and we'll flash up a good ad for it, is this exciting event. So, Destiny, do you want to tell us a little bit about?
You got it, Lee.
So on October the 20th, we are going to be having a Youth Rising Coalition benefit concert / show. And if you don't know about Youth Rising Coalition, Google them. They are an awesome organization in Baltimore that really empowers young entrepreneurs and graphic designers and performers, all these things. And we're going to be featuring a lot of them on the show, and while also raising a little bit of funds for them. And
well, we're not raising the funds; they're raising the funds for themselves.
Right?
We are
they
not
are
making
gonna
the ask.
They are going to be raising. This is just a platform for it, but also just to put out some ways that you can purchase a lot of the things that they've made, or get some information for performers and things like that. So we are very excited to partner with them. They were a General Assembly partnership, and we are going to continue that partnership on this show. And so we wanted to definitely mention that to everybody before we close. So remember that date, October the 20th, same time, 6 p.m. But we don't know how long it's going to last. It's going to be a good thing. So so yeah, is there anything else, Destiny? I mean,
No, well, I mean, since we're plugging in events and programs and initiatives, I would not be part of the YAV team if I didn't say the application season for the 21-22 year is now open. You can go to youngadultvolunteers.org to serve an in-person year for the 21-22 year. If you have any questions or concerns and you're of the ages of 19 to 30, please reach out to me, Destiny Hodges, to learn more about our program.
awesome. And yeah, if you want to write for Unbound, send us a message at info@justiceunbound.org. We're always open to have people writing for us, and yeah, and any kind of perspective. And again, we ask you, get out there, vote. If you have your mail-in ballot, you need to send that in, and wear a mask.
Yes.
Everybody, wear a mask and wash your hands.
Don't touch your face.
Because no one is immune to this virus, and it is to be taken seriously. And we should really put it in perspective that people have died from this virus. And so I think the best thing that we can do, one of the easiest things we can do to show our love of our neighbor, is to wear a mask.
Yes,
and
amen.
To protect one another. If you're feeling sick, go get tested. If you've been around people, go get tested, because that's important. I was tested today, and it is you might feel like the swab is touching your brain a little bit.
Did you do the nose or did you do the mouth swab?
I do the nasal tests are more accurate.
Okay.
That's another thing that people need to know. The nasal tests are more accurate. It's uncomfortable, but I do really push, if you don't feel well, get tested, but always wear a mask. And I say this I saw the other day, and this is me going on a little tangent because we have a little bit of time. I
love it.
I saw like a man and his wife in Lowe's because I had to go get something. The woman was wearing a mask and the man was not. And that is about the 6th time I've seen that. So this is me speaking to you guys and men out there. Don't let toxic masculinity put you in the hospital. Don't think that just because you're a man, you can beat this disease, because it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't discriminate.
I'm gonna go one step further than Lee, because I feel like Lee's being nice. Don't let white supremacy think that you can beat this disease because you're a white man. I don't know what color the man was at Lowe's, but I'm betting on that he probably was white. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole mixture of white supremacy and toxic masculinity. So you are not immune. None of us are immune. None of us, because it is a new virus. None of us are immune. And so we just urge you to wear a mask and to wash your hands and really do diligence to our time.
Amen.
Yes, God has us in God's hands, but God also gave us free will to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And to believe in science. So we urge you to wear a mask, wash your hands, and go vote.
And lastly, stay tuned with us on election night. We'll be doing a special Just Talk Live series and going live to different states and political leaders on multiple aisles of the spectrum. So stay tuned for that as well.
Yeah, election night, November the 3rd. We will be here.
I'll be with Lee.
Yeah, and Destiny will actually be here with me. So we're going to do it safely and all that. But Destiny is going to come here, and we are going to have an election night broadcast to put a different perspective on it, a faith perspective on what's going on, and talk to some church leaders. So stay tuned for that. And remember, October the 20th is the Youth Rising Coalition concert. And so I think that's it. Thank you, Jay Herbert, wherever you are. I'm glad he got everything in before the internet went out.
Look at God.
So
Don't you do it.
Look at God working in this space. So thank you, Jay Herbert. We'll send you an email saying thank you too. I'm sorry we can't tell you on here. But if you want to know more information about the Presbyterian Church too, just go to peaceusa.org. Search around. You might get lost, but that's okay. So until next time, until next week, we will see you then.
Bye.
Bye, Destiny.
Bye, Lee.